Round one here at Grand Prix Richmond. Maria Bartholdi in the booth alongside Pro Tour champion Jacob Van Lunen. We have Mitchell Rayners versus Timothy Landale. Mitchell there on your left, Timothy there on your right. As we mentioned, a multiple GP winner. Timothy, already starting out with an Evolving Wilds in play, is going to sacrifice it to go search up a basic land. Mitchell on red on the left finds a swamp and puts it into play.
Now, Tim is very partial to, finding these beautiful decks I've talked about. He's going to be somebody who's he has that full Magic game where he's able to take a sealed pool, and it doesn't matter how bad or good it is, he's going to build a real deck out of it.
This is going to be a treat to watch. First play is a Binding Mummy, so this is a 2/2 that when you play another zombie, it taps target creature or artifact an opponent controls.
Yeah, now black-white in specific, this color combination, has like an overarching strategy that involves zombies. And there are a lot of white zombies and there are a lot of black zombies. And the more zombies you have, the better they are, because you end up with multiple copies of Binding Mummy and it becomes almost impossible for your opponent to block. You end up with cards like Lord of the Accursed or Plague Belcher that really punish your opponent for letting you get multiple zombies into play.
There's a Minotaur Sure Shot coming down for Michael Rayners over there. So there's a lot of synergy that's possible with Timothy's deck.
Absolutely.
The Binding Mummy, by the way, better than I expected.
Yeah, I think it's funny because it is one of the weaker 2-drops in the set, but when you're playing it in a deck that has a lot of zombies that wants to be attacking, it becomes very, very powerful. And there are a lot of interesting things you can do with it, too, in other card interactions. For example, Vizier of Deferment. You can often block an opponent's attacker and then blink your own zombie, and then it'll come back on their end step, tapping down one of their creatures, and then on your turn you can play another zombie, tapping something else down and get lots of free attacks in. There
you see on your screen Minotaur Sure Shot. It has reach, and it can be pumped up for +1/+0 with a 1 and a red. Here we see a copy of Never being cast, which is going to exile the Minotaur Sure Shot, or excuse me, kill the Minotaur Sure Shot, to let the zombie get in. Mitchell drops to 16. Never to return a card with Aftermath, a new mechanic in the set.
And now it's very powerful because not only does it do something great right away, but it also gives you something to do with your mana later on in the game.
Very flavorful as well.
Yeah.
Here's a copy of Ronus, our first god of the day
right
in
away.
Our first round. Ronus the Indomitable, a 5/5 snake god, indestructible, death touch. Can attack or block, though, unless you control a creature with power 4 or greater. However, Ronus helps you do that. You can pay 2 and a green to give a creature you control +2/+0 and trample until end of turn.
Ronus, a very powerful card. When I first read that, I assumed it would just dominate any game it was involved in, but I've actually been a little less impressed with it than I thought I would be. Still very good, though.
Oh, yeah. It's still a god. Return is being cast, now exiling the Minotaur Sure Shot to create a 2/2 zombie on Timothy's side of the table. So we've essentially returned the Sure Shot as a zombie. Okay, here we go. Glorybringer hits the table on Mitchell's side. This card, a lot of people think this is the best card in the format.
I would have to agree with a lot of people.
4/4, Flying Haste. When it attacks, you can exert it, and if you do, it deals 4 damage to target non-dragon creature an opponent controls. So he has exerted it to kill the Binding Mummy. It won't untap during Mitchell's next untap step, but what a swing. Timothy drops down to 11.
Yeah, this is not a good situation for Tim, obviously. I mean, when your opponent plays a mythic rare followed by the best rare in the set, it generally bodes poorly for you in a game of Limited.
He's still getting in there with that zombie. Gravedigger brings back the Binding Mummy, and he plays it. Mitchell on 12. Yeah, what's also neat is that Glorybringer allowed Ronus to become active as well. There you see Gravedigger on your screen, a 2/2 for 4. When it enters the battlefield, you may return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. Just a solid card.
Yeah, it's been a limited all-star in basically every set it's ever been printed in, which is a lot of sets. And in this format, it has the added bonus of being a zombie, which actually matters these days.
You can see Timothy's put together actually a very nice little synergistic zombie deck, which is not something you always see in Sealed.
Yeah, if you open up the right cards, you're able to make something like that work. It's pretty exciting.
Or you could just open up a god and a Glorybringer.
I think I'd rather be on on that plan.
Mitchell taps 3. Here's a Cartouche of Strength on Ronus the Indomitable. Cartouche of Strength, one of the stronger cartouches in my opinion, which causes Ronus to fight the Binding Mummy and gives it +1/+1 and trample as well.
I think it's the best one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
You're
I'm
backing
on
me
board
up
with
here.
you. Yeah. It's really, really good.
What a swing, too, because not only do you likely get to kill your opponent's creature, you're crashing in for more damage and trample, and there's Fling to close out the game, where you sacrifice a creature, deals damage equal to its power to target creature or player. Just did it right to Timothy's face there. Mitchell Rayners taking game 1 in fashionable style, I must say.
Yeah, I mean, he brought Tim from 20 to 0 in 2 turns, and sometimes it's really hard to deal with something like that. And right now, Tim's got to find a new plan of attack.
Yeah, hopefully he's looking through his sideboard and can find something there to deal with a Glorybringer, even though the best way that I would think is like, oh, cross my fingers, I hope my opponent doesn't draw it.
Yeah, it's some heck of a card.
All right, we're going to take a brief break, and we'll be back very shortly with more action here from Grand Prix Richmond. Back to coverage of Grand Prix Richmond. Maria Bartholdi in the booth alongside JVL. We just saw one heck of a game between Mitchell Rayners and Timothy Landale. We're going to see if Mitchell can bring the heat again with Glorybringer, or if Timothy's what looks like synergistic zombie deck can put something together.
Yeah, I mean, Tim's deck looks like it's really well built. It looks like he found what his pool gave him, and there are so many small interactions there. Like Gravedigger happens to be a zombie to work well with the Binding Mummy. Even Never Return, it creates a zombie, so he can tap something down with that Binding Mummy. I'd be interested to see what else is in his deck, because he might have other powerful cards too that allow him to, get further advantage out of that. If that game could have been very different had he had something like a Wayward Servant or a Lord of the Accursed to really amp up the clock there.
Yeah, and he did play. He's probably kicking himself a little bit by playing that Never as early as he did.
Well, the problem is I don't think he would have even had an opportunity to use it on anything. Like had he killed the Glorybringer, it would have been after it had already killed one of his creatures and gotten it for 4 and turned on the god.
Yeah.
And yeah, but he needed to do it to apply pressure to Mike Mitchell. And I think in this game, if he had the same decision to make, I think he would make it again, because he doesn't want to be playing a long game with Mitchell. If he plays a long game, Ronus is just too powerful of an endgame card. And Tim really needs to run Mitchell over, and I think that's going to be his plan. He may have even sideboarded in things like 1-drops to really push that type of strategy.
That's a good point. I mean, sometimes I get a little nervous when I'm playing that I'm being too aggressive, because that's just the way that I generally play. And I'm like, no, sealed, you have to pull back, Murray, you have to pull back. But that's not always the case.
Yeah, and a lot of the time after you play one game against somebody's deck, you have more of a feel for what they're trying to do, and you can re-sculpt your deck in between games in a format like sealed to be better equipped to face off against what it is you're fighting in that particular round.
How often do you find yourself sideboarding in sealed?
Every single game. I think that sideboarding is one of the most important skills to evolve when you're playing sealed deck, especially in a format like this where you have so many corner case cyclers that do powerful things. It is one of the most important skills you could possibly have.
And you mentioned a Vizier of Deferment. I think I see one in Timothy's opening hand there.
Yeah, it's a great card. I think it's especially strong in these zombie archetypes. It's also a good card because the format has a small amount of removal, and people a lot of the time are trying to win combat with tricks, and Vizier of Deferment can often be a 2/2 that also ruins your opponent's plan for combat.
Looks like Mitchell is taking a mulligan here. Not sure if it's his first or second. His second mulligan.
Oh, wow.
It's going down to 5, which is a tough spot to come back from. Not impossible, though. Especially not with cards that he has.
yeah, you draw some lands and a Glorybringer, and
if you had your dream pool, JVL, what would you want to open? Number 1 card.
in this format?
Yeah.
My number 1 card I would want to open and get to play with. I think just Lay Claim.
Yeah, Leg Claim's great.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a look in here on a match between Brooke North and Jason McLaughlin. We see a Nimbleblade Kenra enchanted with a Cartouche of Zeal and a Channeler Initiate on Brooke's side of the battlefield.
Yeah, Channeler Initiate has been one of the best cards for me in this limited format. The fact that you get to ramp into powerful things and do a lot of stuff with your mana early, and then once you're done spending all of your mana, it's like, oh, I have this 3/4.
Right. It enters the battlefield. That 3 you see on it is 3 -1/-1 counters, so it's currently an 0/1. It will, however, quickly grow as soon as Brooke decides to tap it for any color of mana. It'll remove a -1/-1 counter every time it's tapped for mana. Our first match is ready to go, so let's go back and take a look at what's happening there between Mitchell and Timothy Landale. Oh, turn 2, Binding Mummy again for Timothy. Mitchell's going to pass the turn back. Binding Mummy crashes in for 2. And here we see a Cursed Minotaur. It is a 3/2 with Menace, meaning it needs to be blocked by 2 creatures.
Also a zombie.
Also a zombie. Zombie Minotaur. Timothy attacks for 5. Here you mentioned getting in fast and early, and that's certainly what he's doing. Mitchell drops to 13.
Ooh.
Is that a god of his own?
Yes.
Oketra the True.
Yes, Oketra the True.
God versus God. And here, our first round at Grand Prix Richmond. Oketra the True, there you see her, a 3/6 double strike, indestructible, can attack or block unless you control at least 3 other creatures. For 3 and a white, though, she helps you out create a 1/1 white warrior creature token with Vigilance. Mitchell majorly on the back foot here.
Yeah, I mean, just on board, Tim can put him to 2 this turn. So things not looking very good for Mitchell, who's still stuck on 2 lands here. It's a Tawcrop Elite, I believe.
Tawcrop Elite is a 2/2 flyer, and it has a neat little bonus that when you exert it, it gives your team +1/+1 until end of turn.
Yeah, and I think that might be one of the most undervalued comments in this set. I think when the set first went live on Magic Online and people were drafting, you were seeing those things go very late. And people have quickly learned that that is a very powerful effect in this format, especially with a lot of cards that untap your creatures or give them vigilance.
Timothy Landale takes the game down. Mitchell's stuck on 2 lands on a mull to 5. We're going to go to game 3 here. That was neat, though. We got to see Timothy's deck more in action this game.
Yeah, and now we've seen 2 games that were kind of both blowouts in one direction or the other. And, that game was more because of Mitchell not being able to do anything. Still, even if he had cards to play, it didn't look like they would have matched up well against what Tim was doing.
We're going to take a look back in at the match between Brooke North and Jason McLaughlin.
And that cartouche of Zeal has really punched through a lot of early damage here, it looks like.
Yes, it has. On Brooke's side of the battlefield, we see the Channeler Initiate now only has one -1/-1 counter, and a Quarry Hauler has joined the fight, which I can only assume has removed one of those -1/-1 counters from the Initiate, which is Quarry Hauler's ability. It can either add or subtract a -1/-1 counter from a creature.
From any permanent, actually.
Any permanent.
Yeah, I've had a lot of fun using that card alongside Oracle's Vault.
Oh, yes, to put another brick counter on it.
Yes.
Here we see a defined Great Maw for Brooke, deciding where to put his -1/-1 counters. It comes along with 2. They all go on the Initiate, sending it back to an 0-1. Defined Great Maw remains a 4/5 for 3, which is very strong.
Yeah.
That's something to be said for some of these smaller, earlier drop creatures that have a lot of toughness. They certainly hold -1/-1 counters very well. And the Channeler Initiate is better at removing them than most.
The fact that it can do it itself
Yes.
is very strong.
Jason's going to take a look at Defiant Great Maw there.
That is a powerful hippopotamus.
Oh, yes. I mean, you've heard about hippopotamuses. They are brutal.
They kill more people than any other animal I've heard.
I didn't expect you to know that stat. Thank you. We have a Pathway Initiate, which is a 2/1 for 2, that when you tap it, target creature with power 2 or less can't reblock this turn.
And that's a card that's actually very strong in this format. It works really well with cards like Watchful Naga. It works really well with Exert creatures that start with low power and can gain other power. Just a card that gets really dangerous when your opponent's life total is low.
Especially if you're playing a more aggressive or go-wide strategy.
It's very good at breaking board stalls in these aggressive red decks. And in the early game, it's a 2-drop that attacks.
Brooke now choosing his attack. Going to get in there with the Quarry Hauler and the Defiant Great Maw for 8.
Players at the 9:30 standard challenge. 9:30 standard.
And it looks like Jason, based on his graveyard, used a Brute Strength early just for damage.
Oh, he did. Look at that.
Now that's something that is often very tempting, especially when you have a creature that has prowess.
Yes.
But in a format like Sealed, there are often times where that card is going to not only net you one of your opponent's cards, but also allow you to force through damage in the late game when it's most important. So using that early for damage, often a mistake unless your hand is the most aggressive it could possibly be.
Looks like Jason is going to chump block the Great Maw and let through 4 of that damage from the Quarry Hauler, dropping to 10. Brooke North, by the way, former writer and editor of the Magic Dojo, early online Magic forum.
At Brooke North, I believe he is a New York City-based Magic player these days.
And there's another Ronus the Indomitable, our second Ronus god we've seen today. As we mentioned earlier, it's a 5/5, cannot attack or block unless you control a creature with power 4 or greater, which he certainly does.
Yeah, he has multiple 4-power creatures here.
This isn't looking so great for Jason, so let's go back to our first match between Mitchell Rayners and Timothy Landale as they enter Game 3, the deciding game.
In this game, it looks like Tim's hand is pretty well set up to handle a card like Uranus. Of course, Glorybringer is a much harder card to deal with because even if you deal with it, it's already done so much.
Here we see a Miasmic Mummy, which is a 2/2 for 2, but when it enters the battlefield, each player discards a card.
Now, this card can have a lot of synergy with, the Embalm creatures. I've seen people do especially disgusting things with it alongside Honored Hydra.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Honored Hydra, a 6/6 for 6 normally, but it has Embalm for 4.
Yeah, and when you're playing a 6/6 Trampler on the 4th turn, it just blows the game wide open.
There you can see Honored Hydra on the screen. Yeah, 6/6 Trampler. Miasmic Mummy, I think potentially better in Sealed than in Draft because having to discard sometimes is just so brutal. And we see cards also like Unburden, which forces the opponent to discard 2. It has cycling as well. Potentially having a greater home here in Sealed. Mitchell is going to pitch Synchronized Strike, which is a pump spell which gives 2 creatures +2/+2 and untap them. Here he's casting Ronus and passing the turn back. Timothy draws return. He can still attack because Ronus cannot attack or block because he does not control a creature with power 4 or greater. Timothy attacking for 2, dropping Mitchell to 18. Plays another Cursed Minotaur. Cartouche of Strength in play now for Mitchell, targeting the Cursed Minotaur, going to take it down. Ronus the Indomitable, now getting +1/+1 and trample. Still can't attack or block though, so Timothy's going to get in for another 2, dropping Mitchell to 16.
And here I think Tim's plan, he's not going to be able to get that Ronus off the table, so he's going to have to control the other creatures that Mitchell plays here to keep it offline.
What's a way that you could deal with the god if you had to? Something like
Compulsory Rest.
Compulsory Rest.
And he could have something like that.
Compulsory Rest, of course, 1 and a white. Enchant target creature. Enchanted creature cannot attack or block. However, it gains, pay 2. You can sacrifice it and gain 2 life. Here we have Wander in Death from Timothy Lindale to return 2 creature guards from his graveyard to his hand.
And that's a card that has been a lot more powerful than I expected it to be in this format. Yeah, Wander in Death is so good because of cycling.
Yes.
It's very easy to get creatures into your graveyard and make that card have value. In other formats, it might, not really matter until the very late game.
Mitchell, meanwhile, has played a Colossopede, which just does a 5/5 for 5. Keyword big, which is something that Timothy's deck is going to have trouble dealing with as it activates Ronus. And here we go, Compulsory Rest, just like we drew it up on Ronus the Indomitable. And we have a copy of Wasteland Scorpion on the battlefield for Tim as well. It's a 2/2 with Death Touch. Also has cycling too, but is pretty potent here in this match as it can block and kill a lot of Mitchell's larger creatures. There you have another example of how cycling is just so versatile and valuable in this set on a card like Wasteland Scorpion. If you don't want a 2/2 Death Toucher, just cycle it away. In comes the Colossopede, blocked by the Scorpion. Here we have a Nephcrop Entangler on Mitchell's side of the battlefield, which is a 2/1. However, when you exert it, it becomes a 3/3. And exert, a really interesting mechanic that allows creatures that may not usually have as much relevance in the later game to gain a little bit more relevance. A 3/3 attacker is nothing to sniff at.
Yeah, I found all of the exert creatures to be very powerful in this limited format.
The Mummy comes in again for another 2 damage, and Cursed Minotaur back from the dead. It was always a zombie, though.
Still dead. Just on the board now.
I'm still dead. Here's a Pouncing Cheetah for Mitchell, and of turn, it has Flash. It's a 3/2 kitty cat. So it appears we have more of a fair battle this game.
Yeah, they're definitely going back and forth. The major problem for Tim here is that in a longer game, that Ronus is going to be able to use its activated ability and gain a huge advantage for Mitchell.
Yeah, Compulsory Rest does not stop Ronus from giving creatures +2/+0 and trample. Mitchell attacking here with the Nephcrop Entangler and the Pouncing Cheetah. If he didn't exert, it's for 5. Timothy deciding whether or not to block with that Cursed Minotaur. It does have value as it is a menace creature.
Yeah, and Tim can't let this game go long, so trading is not really in his best interest here.
So you think it's just better for him to take his lumps and try and swing back if he can.
Yeah, I think he really has to try to get himself involved in a race that he can win. He might be trying to bait his opponent into playing a pump spell if he thinks that's what Mitchell has in his hand. Because Tim could have a trick of his own in hand, in which case he'd get a big advantage here. But just blocking for the trade is a
Unless he thinks Mitchell has nothing and he has something good. Tim, by the way, playing without sleeves. No fear.
I appreciate that.
Old school.
Yeah. The way Magic was meant to be played.
I don't know. I like my sleeves. It makes shuffling easier.
I like the feeling of the cards on my hand, actually. Like my hands are like dry and cracking and bloodied.
You need some lotion.
The lotion ruins the cards.
Oh, and there was a trick from Tim. Impeccable timing. So he was trying to bait out a trick from Mitchell. Good read.
Yeah, and you see he uses that on the creature who was blocking anyway. And he knows that he needs to keep that pressure up.
Impeccable timing does 3 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. Mitchell responds by playing a giant spider, which is a 2/4 with reach. Originally printed all the way back in Alpha, and here it is in Amonkhet. Definitely has a lot of toughness that Tim might have trouble dealing with his smaller creatures. Here is cracking in Evolving Wilds. Found a basic land. Passes a turn. Tim drawing off the top of his deck, both players in fact.
Yeah, when both players have no cards left, things are looking really good for Mitchell, able to activate that Ronus.
Ronus's activation means +2/+0 and trample to any of those 2 creatures. So even though it can't attack or block itself, it's certainly bestowing its gift upon the other creatures on the battlefield. Here comes the Minotaur for 3. Followed up by that Taw Crop Elite that we mentioned earlier. A 2/2, when you exert it, gives your team +1/+1. Flying.
And the thing that makes the Ronus especially powerful here, too, is that not only is it going to be pumping creatures for the remainder of the game, but on a penultimate turn, it could actually win a race for him by being sacrificed for 2 life.
Oh, you're right. The Taw Crop Elite not ideally positioned right now because of the giant spider on Mitchell's side of the battlefield. Normally a very powerful card that we saw in an earlier game as well. Deep in the tank. Deciding what to do. Timothy on 12, Mitchell on 14. Mitchell getting in there with a Neff Crop Entangler. Just for 2 damage. Will it be a trade? I don't think so. It appears Mitchell is going to pump it.
Yeah, so he's using Ronus's ability,
I
going to
see.
get over there for extra damage. And
It's going to trample over. And follow it up with the Naga Vitalist. A 1/2 that taps for any color of mana that a land you control could produce.
Yeah, and even though it's just a 1/2 here, which doesn't seem overly relevant, now it gives Mitchell the ability to double block that Cursed Minotaur, which was a huge problem for him up until now.
Yeah, Tim's going to have to draw something to get him out of this because he has no good attacks now because of that giant spider.
He could still exert to trade the Minotaur for the spider, but
That's true. That's true.
not the best.
Then it becomes a question of if he values the Minotaur more highly or the top crop elite, as he would still have the 2/2 bird in play after killing the spider, which is a way to get there in the end. But Ronus is definitely going to try and race him on that account.
And the problem is Ronus' ability is so good at racing here. I think Tim is in a pretty rough spot.
So he passed the turn back. Naga Vitalist, like you mentioned, here just going to get in. With the threat of activation from Ronus to give it +2/+0 and trample. Tim throws the top crop elite in front of the Vitalist. Mitchell pumps.
So he's able to get him for 3 here.
Vitalist goes to the graveyard, but he did his job. He did his duty and trampled. Timothy, dropping to 7, passes the turn back. He has 2 cards to play with now. He's going to attack with his Cursed Minotaur, getting in for 3. It has Menace, so the spider cannot block it. Must be blocked by at least 2 creatures.
And Tim, he's in a really rough spot here. It's going to be very hard for him to win this race unless he has something very good. And on this turn, Mitchell's going to be able to put him to 1.
He's swinging in. And a double pump from Ronus will give it +4/+0, hitting for 6. And he passes the turn back. I see a Vizier of Deferment in Tim's hand as well as a Plains.
Well, does buy Tim a turn here.
It does. Vizier of Deferment, a 2/2 with Flash that blinks an opponent's creature that attacked or blocked.
Yeah, so Tim's going to have to draw 1 more live card here.
Attacks with the Cursed Minotaur, dropping Mitchell to 5. Mitchell swinging in. Here comes the Vizier.
One thing that Tim's probably disappointed about is that he didn't draw that a little bit earlier so that he could have forced Mitchell to pay all that mana before he was blanking it. Because now Mitchell's going to get to make a follow-up play if he has something in his hand, which he probably does.
Spider blinks away. Comes back.
Vizier Deferment's a pretty cool card. And I already talked about its interaction with binding money in these types of strategies.
Pretty versatile because if you need a 2/2 just to block and trade with something, it's there. Can
And
eat a smaller creature if you want.
the fact that it has flash lets it surprise opponents by letting them, you often get lethal damage on the board when they didn't expect it, and you can win races out of nowhere. It can make combat go right for you when it would have gone very wrong. Generally very good against combat tricks. It really shines against opponents that are playing white or green.
Tim taking some time on his turn here. He is currently sitting at 1. Mitchell at 5. The Cursed Minotaur does have Menace, so if he has some kind of pump spell.
Yeah, the thing is, though, is that even if he was able to use a pump spell that added 2 additional damage, then Mitchell would be able to use the ability of Compulsory Rest to sacrifice the Ronus. So what he would need here is a pump spell and then to be able to somehow block on the following turn.
Don't forget about Compulsory Rest like I just did.
Oh, wow. And that's a great draw for
Gravedigger.
Tim.
What's he going to get back?
I believe he got back the Vizier of Deferment, which is
Well,
incredible in this spot.
wow. Must have been happy with that draw. Mitchell down to 2. Attacking with the spider.
And it looks like Tim might be able to steal this one.
Blocks with the Gravedigger.
And what's really great here is that, all right, he's going to force Mitchell to pump. So the thing is by blocking there, you're not just letting that happen, because if your opponent chooses not to pump, you could always Vizier your own Gravedigger and return a creature from your graveyard to your hand again. In this case, that doesn't work out so well because Ronus grants trample,
Right.
but usually that's something very valuable to look for.
Here comes an Initiate's Companion, a 3/1 for 2. And the spider blinked out of the game and came back. Whenever the companion deals combat damage to a player, untap target creature or land.
Yeah, not the most relevant ability, but when you're really just bashing your opponent, it lets you do fun things with Exert.
Oh, yes.
And when your opponent has a creature that they have to block, you can often get in with that alongside it and untap something like a Tycrop Elite or something.
Yeah.
So,
The
very good.
green-white Exert deck.
Oh, man.
So good.
Yeah. There's no deck I'd rather be past than the green-white Exert deck in this format.
What a close game.
Yeah, this game has been incredible.
I can't believe he came back. The Gravedigger, almost exactly what he needed in that scenario. Deciding, it looks like, to attack with the Cursed Minotaur as well as the Vizier of Deferment.
Yeah, now what's interesting here is if Tim attacks with everything, then Mitchell can sacrifice the Ronus to compulsory rest, but then he's also forced to trade off the Initiate's Companion. So if Tim has another creature to block that giant spider on the swing back, then he could be able to steal the game.
All right, the companion in front of the Gravedigger, the spider in front of the Vizier. Here comes the sacrifice from compulsory rest.
And that's good enough. Yeah, so Tim's attack put Mitchell down to 1, but Tim didn't have a creature to block the giant spider, so Tim made that attack banking on the fact that Mitchell forgot that the compulsory rest would allow him to gain the 2 life. But
wow.
Mitchell did not forget, and Tim did not have any sort of way to stop the incoming lethal attack, and that was it.
Mitchell Rayners 2-1 over Timothy Landale. Let's take a look in here at Kyle Robert and Chris Ingersoll.
Oh, a lot of cool cards on the board here.
Oh, do you mean those full art lands?
Some of my favorite cards on the set on the table right now.
Which are your favorite?
Minotaur Javelineer.
Oh, such a good card.
Yeah, it's so strong.
4/2.
Yeah, and you can pay 2 and discard a card to put a -1/-1 counter on one of the creatures, and then it can't block that turn.
Exactly what Red-Black wants to be doing. We also see a Baleful Ammit on Chris's side of the battlefield. I think that's a cartouche under it. It already had lifelink. If it is, well, it has double lifelink.
Yeah, and with that cartouche on the field, I wonder if Chris in this game at some point has bounced that Trial of Ambition, really gotten a lot of value out of it.
Trial of Ambition would have forced Kyle to sacrifice a creature. Meanwhile, on Kyle's side of the table, we see a Liliana's Mastery, which has created that zombie that we see there, a Soul Stinger,
and a Wayward Servant.
Wayward Servant.
Yeah, which is actually bigger than it normally would be right now, thanks to the Liliana's Mastery.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah. And another cool thing going on with Kyle's side of the table is that he has that Cradle of the Accursed in play.
Yes.
Normally just making a 2-2, but alongside that Liliana's Mastery, that is
3-3.
a 3-3 that's also going to drain Chris for 1, thanks to Wayward Servant.
Liliana's Mastery gives zombies +1/+1.
Kyle in a very dangerous spot here, though, because Chris does have that Javelineer in play, and Kyle's only at 4. So if Chris is ever able to get enough cards in hand to just dump his hand and make Kyle's team not able to block, then the game is just going to end.
We also have a Dread Wanderer, which has joined the party for Chris. A 2/1 enters the battlefield tapped, and you can bring it back from the graveyard for 2 and a black as long as you have 1 or fewer cards in hand. Here's Gravedigger for Kyle. Let's see what he's going to get back. Game's been going for a little while, so we do have some interesting stuff in the graveyard. Was that a Bone Picker that he picked up?
Ooh, I don't know. It may have just been a Tycrop Elite. I find people get Tycrop Elite a lot with Gravedigger.
Makes
when
sense.
They're playing black-white. Yeah, it's such a good finisher.
And he does have a critical mass of creatures as well.
Yeah, so it looks like he is using the Javelineer, and he's going to make it so that 2 of Kyle's creatures are unable to block, and then he's attacking with 2 4-power creatures.
All those -1/-1 counters. Gravedigger down to a 1/1.
Kyle luckily was able to gain a good amount of life on the previous turn, thanks to his own Cartouche of Ambition and a Wayward Servant.
Here comes the Baleful Amit, as well as the Dread Wanderer. Time to reflect.
Ow!
Now that's a card in a zombie deck.
Yeah, that's one heck of a card there. That card is so good in the zombie deck and so bad in all the other decks.
Yes.
That it really is a delight, especially when you're drafting, because when you're drafting the zombie deck and you see
Nobody
one
else
early,
wants it.
you can just pass it around the table confidently knowing that it's going to come right back to you.
Time to reflect, of course, is a single white mana. Exile target creature that blocked or was blocked by a zombie this turn.
And in a deck like Kyle's, where you have this many zombies, that's a really powerful removal spell for its cost.
Blighted Bat hits the table for Kyle. It's a 2/1. You can pay additional 1 mana to give it haste. And look at it. Look how Kyle has seemingly crafted himself into a better board state despite Chris's Javelineer on his side of the table.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like Chris used a lot of cards with that Javelineer to force through damage, and instead of playing them, thinking that he could end the game quickly. But the lifelink and the drains from the Wayward Servant from Kyle's side have really just got him back into this game.
So in comes the 2/2 zombie, which is a 3/3 thanks to Liliana's Mastery, and in fact a 4/4 thanks to that Cartouche that's sitting under it, and the Blighted Bat get in there. Blighted Bat, also a zombie, so it's a
Added
3-power.
synergy. The set has so many interesting cards that interact so well with the other cards in the set.
And every time, like you mentioned, that Kyle plays a zombie, Wayward Servant is going to drain Chris for 1.
Kyle is also living the Seal Deck player's dream, where you draw 6 lands and then never ever draw another one. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, that is the dream. I'm trying to remember if Soul Stinger is a zombie.
It is not.
Okay,
Yeah.
everything else is, though. Pretty
it's a
good.
scorpion, though.
Scorpion.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, you know, it lives in the desert.
You know, scorpions have killed more people than...
They're terrifying.
Just kidding.
I honestly, I think that's one of, the scariest types of creature. I wish we had more, cuddly and adorable creatures in Magic.
More gnarled packs.
Yes, I agree.
Here's a Ret Crop Spearmaster from Kyle. It is a 3/1. When you exert it, becomes a 4/1 first strike. It's going to immediately hit the bin, though. Here's another copy of Ronus the Indomitable. This is the 3rd Ronus we've seen today, only in round 1 here at GP Richmond. 5/5 Indestructible God. In comes Dread Wanderer.
Everybody seems to have Ronus.
How does everybody have Ronus? I don't understand.
And that's a really good one. I feel like it's better in Sealed than it is in Draft, too.
Yeah.
The fact that you can really just continue to pump your creatures as the game goes later, it's just so good.
Soul Stinger blocking the Dread Wanderer there, which gets to move its counter onto something else when it dies. Onto the Merciless Javelineer. Pass the turn back to Kyle. Score currently 12-10 in favor of Kyle.
And I think Kyle may have drawn that Ronus exactly 2 turns too late
Or
from the
Chris.
looks of things. Yeah, Chris may have drawn that Ronus exactly 2 turns too late.
Yeah. Because now he doesn't even have a creature with power 4 or greater. Kyle swinging in with the bat and the zombie. Life linking 4/4 zombie, 3/1 flying bat. It's a pretty big chunk of damage, dropping Chris down to 3. Kyle goes up to 16.
And when we joined in to watch this game,
No.
the life totals were virtually reversed.
Yes.
And things have turned around quickly here.
Just a land in hand for Chris, which normally is fairly useful with a Merciless Javelineer, but in this case, not going to do a heck of a lot. He's going to discard it to give another -1/-1 counter. And attack, he has pumped his Javelineer with Ronus, making it big enough to let Ronus attack as well.
Yeah, and this is essentially a concession attack from the looks of it.
Always make him kill you.
Yeah. Have it.
And there's the handshake. Yeah. Kyle Robert takes down the match 2-0 against Chris Ingersoll. That was a really cool game to watch, too. What a swing back.
Yeah, that was crazy. There was a lot of interesting stuff that happened there. The Minotaur Javelineer can make a game really complicated. And it's a card that rewards you for using it correctly and punishes you for using it incorrectly.
Oh, yes.
So it's a very skill-intensive card because
discarding's no joke.
Yeah, it punishes you a lot if you're not able to finish your opponent off. Without those cards, it's going to be hard to win a long game.
We are going to take a brief break, and we'll be right back very soon with more action here at Grand Prix Richmond. Grand Prix Richmond, Maria Bartholdi here in the booth alongside JVL. We saw some cool games down there in the feature match area.
Yeah, lots of Ronus.
Yes. 3 copies of Ronus the Indomitable in round 1 alone.
Yeah, he's everywhere. It's pretty scary if you're afraid of snakes.
Well, we have one more match we're going to watch, a time walk match here. We'll see if Ronus shows up in this match or not. Let's head down to the feature match area. Here we are watching a feature match at Grand Prix Richmond, time walk between Chris McDaniel and Austin Rhodes, Maria Bartholdi, alongside Jacob Van Lunen.
That's an exemplar of strength.
Yes, it is, on turn 2.
Yeah, and that card is very powerful when it's played on the second turn. Your opponent doesn't have a 2-drop of their own.
Tormenting Voice, not going to block a exemplar of strength. Oh, there we go. That's the play you were talking about earlier, JVL.
Yeah, and now that's not only is that card advantage, but it also sets up Austin for a very impressive turn 4.
Here comes Chris attacking with the exemplar of strength, going to remove a -1/-1 counter off of it.
Yeah, and what makes exemplar of strength so good on the second turn is that if your opponent can't play a 2-drop of their own to block it, then on the third turn it's going to be attacking as a 3/3, and then it's a 4/4. So it really gets out of hand quickly. It's a reasonable 2-drop that, when unanswered, can take a game over.
Absolutely. Curse Minotaur for Chris. Austin here playing a Thresher Lizard, which is a 3/2, which becomes a 4/4 if you have one or fewer cards in hand. But that Hydra is sitting in the graveyard there, ready to be embalmed.
And Austin may just choose to trade off this Thresher Lizard here.
Exemplar of Strength attacks in again as a 3/3. Chris gains another life, as well as the Minotaur, which can't be blocked because it has Menace. Yep, there you go. Lizard trades for Exemplar. Austin's at 18, down to 15.
This is such a cool interaction that we've seen here. The Tormenting Voice discarding that Honored
yes.
Hydra. It found Austin the lands he needed so that he would be able to do it on turn 4.
And here it is.
Drew him additional cards. Here he is with a 6/6 Trampler on the 4th turn.
Not too shabby. Not too shabby. Oh, they're going to get an embalmed Hydra token.
I have a pet, a wonderful pug who I love very much, and even gods have pets. That's the flavor text on Honored Hydra.
Even the part about the pug.
No, just the part about gods having pets. It just makes me relate to them better.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
They're
Like,
huge. They have animal heads. But you know what? They're just like us.
they are.
Lord of the Accursed coming down for Chris McDaniel gives zombies +1/+1 relevant, there with that Cursed Minotaur being a zombie. It can also give Menace for 1 and a black and tap.
That's not quite as relevant
No.
when the Minotaur already has Menace, though. Yeah.
Double Menace, not really a thing. Austin, meanwhile, at 11, but has a grip full of cards and a 6/6 Trampler who's going to crash in.
And he's got all 3 colors of mana, so looks like he's going to be operating on all cylinders for the remainder of the game.
Horror of the Broken Lands is the play. It is a 4/4. Whenever you cycle or discard, it gets +2/+1. It itself is cycling for a single black mana.
And that card has played really well for me. One of the things I really like about that card is that you can cycle it early and get it back with Water in Death to produce some card advantage in more controlling matchups.
Yes. Curse Minotaur attacking there for 4. And a Bitterblade Warrior is the follow-up play. A 2/2 for 2, when exerted, becomes a 3/2 with Death Touch.
And just a really great card that attacks early and then later on can attack into virtually anything, unless it has first strike, of course.
Austin drops to 7. Chris at 16. Yeah, that's the Bitterblade Warrior, not afraid of an Honored Hydra when it comes smashing in.
The one thing that's interesting is that it's not that good at blocking.
No. Honored Hydra swings in for 6. We'll drop Chris to 10.
something that I've really liked about Bitterblade Warrior is it's a common that combos very nicely with one of the better uncommons in the set, which is Destined to Lead.
Oh, indeed. We've got 2 cards hitting the table for Austin. Thresher Lizard, Naga Vitalist. Just kind of some dudes right now.
Yeah, that's basically what he needs, though, is just some dudes. His life total is getting low. He's just going to kind of want to throw creatures in front of whatever Chris is, outputting and hope it's good enough to survive for this 6/6 to just end the game with 4 attacks.
Chris was able to find his 4th land here. And has some pretty strong cards in its grip, including a final reward there I see at the front.
Yeah, I thought he actually had 2 final rewards.
Oh, really?
There. Yeah. So if he's ever able to find that 5th land, he could really, fight his way back into this game. He does have an advantage in terms of life total, so he might just try to steal this game by being aggressive, but it's going to be hard here.
How big of a fan are you of green-black in this format in general?
I think there are a lot of different decks you can build with it, and I like being focused on one of those strategies when I do it. I think, for example, Nest of Scarabs is one of the coolest things you can do in this format, and it's a deck that really rewards you for being green-black.
Austin attacking here with the Thresher Lizard as well as the Honored Hydra. Early on in the draft format, I drafted 2 Nest of Scarabs just to do it. I think I passed a never to return or something like that just because I wanted the second Nest of Scarabs.
Yeah, when it's good, it's your best card.
And a Merciless Javelineer for Austin. As we mentioned, one of your more favorite cards in the set, too.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best cards in an aggressive red-black deck. Can just close the game very quickly, and there aren't that many ways to punish the fact that you're paying 4 mana for 2 toughness. Beyond Magma Spray, your opponent's going to be paying at least 4 to get it off the table, unless they have, they might pay 3 for a Trial of Zeal, but
its ability, pay 2, discard a card, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. That creature cannot block this turn.
And here it's also pumping Horror of the Broken Lands. So out here in the Desert Sands, he's going to die to a Horror of the Broken Lands.
Wow. Are you a songsmith?
I think so. I think that probably should have been said to the melody of Kokomo.
And there you see it in action. Evolving Wilds discarded to put a -1/-1 counter on the Cursed Minotaur. Cannot block. In come the Javelineer, as well as the Honored Hydra. And Horror of the Broken Lands, which has been pumped. Just the Lord of the Accursed. Chris is going to scoop him up. Austin Rhodes taking game 1 here in this Time Walk match. And because it's Time Walk, we can time travel. And here we are for game 2.
Wow, that was so fast. They're so good at shuffling.
In Evolving Wilds to play for Austin. Chris currently has a Forest and Swamp in play. Austin going to go find a basic land. I like those sleeves. It's my favorite color.
Bright green. I like that Chris McDaniel, both of our old school dudes
no sleeves.
were battling without sleeves. Chris McDaniel was a very well-known deck builder. About a decade ago, I think a lot of people really respected his opinions on how to build decks. He worked a lot with Billy Marino. I think the 2 of them are Austin-based, and even to this day, I think some of the decks they made are considered some of the strongest decks ever made in the history of Magic.
Wow. Naga Vitalist is the play for Austin. Chris's play, Cursed Minotaur. Yeah, I'm seeing Chris top 4 GP Madison 2006, Pro Tour top 4 in Charleston and Los Angeles in 2006 and 2005, respectively. All 3 colors of mana for Austin. Another Thresher Lizard enters play. Just a 3/2 until you have one or fewer cards in hand. Then it becomes a serious threat.
Yeah, I mean, that card is it's a 4/4 very often in this format. I think that there are also fun things you can do with it with combat tricks, because you can augment your combat tricks by playing them and getting yourself down to one or fewer cards in hand, thus making something like Mighty Leap or Spidery Grasp a more powerful effect than it might have been otherwise.
An Ornery Kudu enters play for Chris, giving a -1/-1 counter to the Minotaur, keeping that Kudu a 3/4.
Yeah, it's much better at blocking the Thresher Lizard as a 3/4.
Oh, yes. Minotaur gets in for 2, meanwhile, dropping Austin to 18. The old tap-untap dance. Is this a combat celebrant?
It's kind of an exciting card.
Yes, it is. It's a mythic.
Yeah. Now, this card, you can exert it when it attacks, and if you do so, if it was the first time it was exerted this turn, you untap all of your other creatures, and then you get an additional combat step.
That's
afterward.
so cool.
Harkens back to a lot of powerful cards that have been made in Magic's past, and it's definitely the most powerful of all of those. So,
I do love a second combat. It's like second breakfast, but better.
yeah, I mean, you can just kill people. A lot of the time when you're in racing situations, you just end games out of nowhere. It's an especially strong card when you use it with Trial of Zeal, because you get to, haste it and then kill your opponent basically out of nowhere.
There's a Ceradon on the table for Austin.
Desert Ceradon is another card that cycles for just a red. So all of the creatures that cycle for a single colored mana are reasonably good in this format.
And when you just play him, he's a 6/4. It's hard.
It's a fine thing to be doing with your mana.
When you're building a cycling deck, do you ever consider playing off-color cycling cards that just have colorless cycling?
Sometimes you need to if you don't have enough cyclers and you have cards like, Drake Haven and Ruthless Snipers, and your deck is really, really focused on making that matter, then you might need to play a card or two that just cycles and doesn't have any other ability. But if you just have a few Cycling Matters cards, it's really hard to justify playing, something where you spend 2 mana just to draw a card, because you could replace it with a different card and you wouldn't have to pay 2 mana just to have that card in your hand.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Chris has gotten up from the table, potentially to ask a judge a question. Has done nothing on his turn and passes it back to Austin.
He's trying to see if something works how he thinks it does.
Another Desert Ceradon.
Grand Prix competitors.
Chris is going to cycle.
Are online at pairings.starcitygames.com.
Oh, Austin didn't attack. Chose not to attack that turn.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He drew for turn. Just plays a Bitterblade.
I feel like Austin may be taking 2 combat steps this turn, and I really appreciate that he did that for us,
Thank you so much, Austin.
making this happen.
I'll tell you what's great when you have 2 combat steps, having 2 Desert Ceradons in play. Here comes Exert
Yeah.
on the Combat Celebrant. And everything else is going to
Yeah, this is...
have another chance to get in there. Yep, they're going to untap.
Did not attack with the Naga Vitalist.
Nope. We see a double block there on a Ceradon. Pouncing Cheetah is going to come on in
Yeah, and
to
that...
join the combat for next turn. Or not next turn, next combat.
And the thing that's cool about that, too, is that by playing that Pouncing Cheetah, the Thresher Lizard became a 4/4. So he was essentially able to use the Pouncing Cheetah as a combat trick.
And there's the handshake. Austin Rhodes takes down the match against Chris McDaniel 2-0. That was a bunch of cool matches we saw, JVL.
Yeah, that was awesome. We got to see a lot of Ronus. Yeah, it's just awesome.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in no time with round 2 here from Grand Prix Richmond.
Grand Prix events offer great experiences for players of all skill levels. These Magic celebrations are headlined by 2-day open tournaments with pro players, feature top artist signings, and host a wide range of side events. Find an upcoming Grand Prix event near you at magic.wizards.com/Grand Prix.
Looking for a place to hang out and play Magic? Head to your local game store this and every Friday to play Friday Night Magic events. Get more info at magic.wizards.com/FNM.